Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 here on Broadcasting Scotland. My name's Kenny McBride and I'm joined this evening by two excellent guests. Firstly by from the SNP Socialist Group, Chris McCusker.
Good evening, Kenneth.
Good evening, Chris. And on the other side, stepping in at the last minute after we had a mix-up with Stuart McMillan, MSP. He had double booked himself. And sadly, we couldn't take priority tonight. But we do have the wonderful Sam Payton from the Save Loch Lomond group. So, Sam, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Kenny, and thanks for having me on tonight.
Oh, well, thank you for stepping in at such short notice. So we start this evening, as we always do, with our coronavirus update. And as of 2 p.m. today, a total of 917,750 people in Scotland have been tested through NHS Scotland labs and UK government regional testing centres. Of these, 866,847 were confirmed negative, 50,903 were positive. There were 1,739 new confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Scotland today, and sadly there were 28 new reported deaths. This will of course be an underestimate of the total number of cases, as not everyone with the virus will display symptoms, and not everyone with symptoms will necessarily get tested. As ever, we do urge you, if you are showing symptoms of a fever, a new dry persistent cough, or a change in your sense of taste or smell, then please do book a test as quickly as you can. Of the people who have tested positive, there were 873 people in hospital last night, 73 of whom were in intensive care. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection now stands at 2,653. This number only includes those who have died in hospital having received a positive test for the virus. The latest UK daily figures available show that 44,158 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 191 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings, not just in hospitals. And National Records of Scotland also published data today for the week ending the 18th of October, which was week 42 of the year. In that week, 75 deaths were registered in Scotland where the novel coronavirus was mentioned on the death certificate. This is an increase of 50 from the previous week. Of those 75, 58 occurred in hospitals, 12 in care homes, and 5 in private homes or other non-institutional settings. 60 of these deaths had previously been reported in the Scottish Government's daily reporting. The total number of deaths in Scotland directly linked to COVID-19 therefore now stands at 4,376. And before we get on to the rest of tonight's news, if you would like to join the conversation here, you can do so on Twitter by following us at Broadcast Scot and using the hashtag Scotland at 7. That's hashtag Scotland AT and the number 7. And as you can see, we'll be flashing some of those tweets up on the screen throughout the show. So do please get in touch. But our first story tonight, the SNP has warned that Scotland must not be left out of pocket by the Treasury at a time when public health restrictions are tightened locally and nationally, calling for clarity over how extra financial support for English councils will pass through to Scotland in consequential funding. As the UK government sets out financial support packages for English councils as further tiered measures are implemented, the SNP's Shadow Chancellor has warned that businesses and workers across Scotland must not be forced to pay the price as a result of withheld funding and income support. Commenting, the SNP's Shadow Chancellor Alison Thulis MP said, "As further restrictions are introduced in line with public health guidance, it is vital that businesses, workers and households are supported, rather than pushed into hardship as a result of withheld support." So, Sam, I think we'll come to you first on this. Now, we've talked before about this problem of funding not necessarily coming through as quickly to Scotland as we might hope. And now we're seeing these new restrictions introduced. We talked yesterday about the money going to Manchester and the negotiations that have gone over that. And there is obviously a question of whether there then applies consequentials on that coming to Scotland. Is this just another case of the UK government not thinking about how the devolution settlement works and perhaps not doing the hard work behind the scenes to make sure that Scotland does get a fair share of the funding?
Thank you for coming to me first, Kenny, on this one. Basically, all I can say is the UK government really don't care about the devolved governments. You can see the way they've treated Manchester and the various regions across England. They really do not care about the working class, normal people. All they're interested in is themselves, and that is very, very apparent. And that's one of the problems with not Scotland not being independent. We have no control over our finances, and we've got to wait on Westminster, which is just ridiculous, especially at this moment in time when we're in the middle of a pandemic. And people right across Scotland are being told to self-isolate. Not everybody has access to savings or family that can help them out. Not everybody knows how to go and claim for support. And with the furlough scheme pretty much ended, it's putting businesses under so much financial pressure as well. And I think the way it's working, I read today, I'm not very kind of caught up today in a lot of things, but I'm sure I read today there was a report that went out with the Unity Union who said that the way the current furlough scheme's working, people are getting paid less than minimum wage.
Yeah. Chris, coming to you on this then. A lot of us have known for a while that the Barnett formula doesn't necessarily work terribly well in all circumstances. It's kind of a rule of thumb kind of thing rather than a precise formula. I wonder, is this another case of the pandemic showing up the systemic failures that we have in British society, and maybe this is a time, if we are going to maintain the union, to start thinking about different ways of distributing funding?
Well, for a start off, Kenny, right away we need to be very clear in the fact that I've got no interest in helping to save the union. The union is a defunct conscript of a bygone era where it extols Victorian values and it rewards the rich and it disadvantages the poor. That'll come to no surprise to any independent supporter that's watching the show tonight. But Sam's quite right to highlight what's happening in Manchester. And basically, it seems to me that anything north of the Watford Gap is basically not worth saving. According to Boris Johnson, we could be sitting in a barren wasteland, which could look like something out of a Mad Max film, and yet there are people within Scotland who will vote for the union come hell or high water. And that is actually coming at this moment in time. I can't make a more starker prediction than what is coming down the line, because we add in COVID, we add in the fact that the ending of furlough is coming up at the end of the month. We add in 10 years of austerity engineered by the Tory party, which is basically it's been austerity on stilts more than anything else, and yet Scotland are not getting what they need. And we're not asking for money here. We're asking for the powers that are necessary for our Parliament to act in a way that any other Parliament in the developed world ordinarily works in. So what we're asking for is we're asking for powers over borrowing, powers over immigration, powers over employment law, powers over transport. Look, they are making a hash of this, so they need to give us the powers. And yeah, we'll make mistakes along the way and stuff like that, but we'll make a brawl fist of it rather than the ham-fisted attitude that we're getting from Boris Johnson at this moment in time.
Well, Chris, you did mention there the end of the furlough scheme, and that brings us on to our next story. Ian Blackford has challenged Boris Johnson to stop shortchanging our communities and U-turn on Tory plans to scrap the furlough scheme next week. Speaking at Prime Minister's questions, Ian Blackford said the Prime Minister had shown total disregard for Greater Manchester, just like he has done for people in Scotland. The SNP Westminster leader warned that Tory cuts would cause a wave of mass redundancies and slash the incomes of millions of workers, and said it was clear the Prime Minister had taken a deliberate decision to let unemployment soar, just like Thatcher did in the 1980s. So Sam, on this one, you said earlier that the Tories only care about themselves. This is just Ian Blackford saying much the same thing. What do you think the impact will be on the popularity of the Tories if they do unleash this wave of mass redundancies, particularly in the north of England, where they've recently made such big gains? Do you think this is going to backfire on them quite badly?
I think it already has, Kenny, because already you're seeing reports when you're watching mainstream media talking to citizens of Manchester, turn around and saying that they voted for Tories because they were made promises, and the Tories are going against those promises. And as much as I feel sorry for what's happening for the people of Manchester, they now are in the position that we have been in for many years in Scotland regarding the Tories. There's a reason why we say never trust a Tory. So at the end of the day, there's so many redundancies going to be made, and I know the deadline's coming up for people making a claim for their universal credits, if they want a payment before Christmas, which I think is absolutely despicable, that if they don't make a claim, within the week or so, that people could be without money over the Christmas period which is just absolutely unthinkable. And what's going to happen is people are going to start relying on food banks more. You will probably see crime rate going up because there'll be more shoplifting because people get desperate in order to feed themselves. Once again, the Tories are doing a grand job, aren't they? And totally messing up. But what they're showing is how messed up the UK actually is, and how we are all have different priorities and different ways of looking after our own citizens. And very much it's time that the UK started to break up and everybody start going their separate ways.
Okay, well, we move on now to some good news, we think, and using a new mathematical approach to screen large groups for COVID-19 could be around 20 times cheaper than individual testing, a study suggests. Applying a recently created algorithm to test multiple samples in one go reduces the total number of tests needed, lowering the costs of screening large populations for COVID-19, say the researchers. This novel approach will make it easier to spot outbreaks early on. Initial research shows it is highly effective at identifying positive cases when most of the population is negative. A team of researchers, including a theoretical physicist from the University of Edinburgh, developed the method called the hypercube algorithm and conducted the first field trials in Africa. Tiny quantities taken from individual swabs were mixed to create combined samples and then tested. The team showed that a single positive case could still be detected even when mixed with 99 negative swab results. If this initial test highlighted that the mixed sample contained positive cases, then researchers used the algorithm to design a further series of tests. This enabled them to pinpoint individual positive swab results within the combined sample, making it easy to identify people who are infected. So Chris, I'm not convinced either of us is smart enough to talk about the maths involved here. This is Professor Neil Turek, who is the inaugural Higgs Chair of Theoretical Physics at Edinburgh, is probably a lot smarter than either of us. But it does show, I think, doesn't it, that there's been a huge amount of research done very, very quickly around COVID, and a lot of it being done in Scotland. It's really impressive, the response from the academic world, hasn't it?
Well, it just goes to show how innovative that Scotland R&D actually is, and why it's so necessary. Again, I'll hark back to my socialist rant at the start of the show, but you know, it's why Scotland needs direct investment into R&D. Because through the passage of time, we have conceived and developed all sorts of wonderful inventions, from penicillin to the radio to the list is endless, and what it has been up until now is the fact that the UK have taken all the credit for it. Because they have been tied in to this despotic union, that anything that comes out of Scotland, you get plums growing near Arbroath, and they get slapped with a butcher's apron and sent down to London. Strawberries growing in Dundee, and they get slapped again with a butcher's apron and sent down for Wimbledon. And our identity has been strangled by the UK is not a country, I have to point that out, but it's been strangled by another country that relies so heavily on what Scotland produces. So it's a perfect case for Scotland going its own way.
And Sam, just quite quickly here, as I say, this is quite interesting development, and it does show how, as I say, how quickly we've been able to produce all kinds of new testing and all sorts of things happening. It does make you wonder a wee bit why we don't kind of throw this kind of effort into all sorts of other things, isn't it?
It does sometimes, but then again, it all comes down to funding, doesn't it, Kenny? And what funds are available. But you mean the universities have been doing a fantastic job in terms of research into COVID and various other diseases and things. And as Chris rightly says, we're an innovative country. I read somewhere that I don't know how much this is a conspiracy theory or whatever, so people do apologise, but I quite liked it. It was one of those ones I quite liked, and I thought, yeah, I'm proud to be Scottish. But supposedly Scotland produces more geniuses as a country than any other country in the world. But anybody that's out there who has the proper thing on that, but I would be pleased to be stand corrected. But when I read that, I just thought, I don't know if that's true, but I quite like that.
Well,
we do have a lot of.
I know that we do have one of the best educated populations in the world. We have more, I think, university graduates per head than any other country. And we certainly have more geniuses on our television programmes than most. So we do move on now, though, and Scotland should receive at least £62 million annually in replacement for the European Maritime and Fisheries Fund, according to Fisheries Secretary Fergus Ewing. Mr Ewing raised the issue at an EU exit operations meeting last week and has now written to the Secretary of State for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, George Eustace, seeking much needed clarity on UK government funding for this vital sector from the 1st of January next year. In addition to Brexit, Scotland's seafood sector has been hit hard by the coronavirus pandemic, with the loss of export and food service markets. The new funding is also key to supporting recovery for coastal communities and protecting jobs. So, Chris, this fund, it's somewhat similar to the kind of funding that we give to farmers currently through the Common Agricultural Policy. It's a similar sort of fund. And this obviously makes a big difference for fishing communities, but again, with just a couple of months left, the UK government hasn't announced a replacement, hasn't given us any detail on that. How do you think the Scottish government, and come to that, the Welsh government and the Northern Irish government, are supposed to cope when they're just not getting this information through from Westminster?
Well, you've got a horrible knack of asking the most obvious of questions tonight, Kenny. The lacklustre approach and clarity and leadership from Westminster with regards the settlement for Scotland to be able to set its budget pretty much tells you everything that you need to know. When we're trying to sort of like set out the way forward, and that's because we have very anonymous people within the Westminster front bench. With the exception of the odd appearance from Jacob Rees-Mogg, the odd appearance from Priti Patel, whom we'll hopefully discuss later on, and there are so many invisible faces there, which basically tells you that the government has not been run by the government. The government has been run by one man, and that man is Dominic Cummings. And it suits Dominic Cummings basically to starve the front bench out of information, so they can't relay anything to the devolved governments. Now, again, we go back to the fact that Kate Forbes has been unable to set down her budget with regards of the money which should be mirrored by the UK government for what the EU paid us in fisheries subsidies. The litmus test will be that if that money is not forthcoming, that will be the rock that the Tories will perish on, because we've already seen it once before that there was money coming from the EU for farming, which was stolen by Michael Gove, and it took us in excess of 10 months in order to try and scrape some of it back. So, as I say, the litmus test will be that if this money is not mirrored to the Scottish Government and it is centralised in Whitehall, then that tells Scotland everything it needs to know as to the Tories' intention going forward.
Absolutely. And Sam, we heard, I think it was just last week, about the Brexit preparations that were specifically withheld from the devolved government, even though the documents acknowledged that the devolved governments needed to know. Do you think this is strategy not to keep the devolved governments involved, or do you think this is just that the UK government, again, doesn't know what it's doing?
I think they do know what they're doing, Kenny, and I think it's strategy, and I think it's deliberate. They're doing this deliberately because what they're trying to do is make the devolved governments are not competent enough, and they can't answer questions when it comes to within their own parliaments. They're not able to answer the proper questions, coming from the opposition. So I think we would be quite naive to think that they just don't know what they're doing. As much as they do come across very childish, and what's the word, kind of goofy and things like that. I do actually think they know what they're doing. I think they're doing it's deliberate. And it's in order to try, it's a bit of, what's the word, crikey, brain's gone blank now, Kenny, distractions. It's all about distracting people as well, because we're so busy focusing on other things that we're not focusing on what the UK government's actually doing, which is basically fulfilling contracts for themselves and their pals. People are so busy running about worrying about everything else that we're not actually focusing on what's actually happening right in front of our eyes. And what they're doing is, in my opinion, is creating a two-tier system where it's them and us. The rich keep getting richer and the poor become even poorer and more vulnerable. I do think, going back to your question again, Kenny, I do think they know what they're doing, and I think it's part of their strategy.
Well, we move on now to money that the Scottish Government does have, and more funding will be made available for businesses affected by the extension of temporary restrictions to slow the spread of the coronavirus. The First Minister announced today that the current temporary restrictions will remain in place until the 2nd of November. As a result, funding for business grants over the period will be increased proportionately. The COVID-19 Restrictions Fund will now provide one-off grants of up to £4,310 to businesses required to close by the regulations. For businesses that may remain open but are directly impacted by the restrictions, the Maximum Hardship Fund grant will increase to £2,155. Additionally, grants of £1,650 will help those firms that are required to close to help meet the 20% employer's contribution that they're required to pay under the current UK government furlough scheme. These one-off grants are for the period until the 2nd of November only and will be replaced by a new system of business support to complement the levels approached due to be debated in Parliament next week. The news comes as Scotland's chief statistician announced today that GDP increased by 2.6% in August. This is the fourth consecutive month of increasing GDP following the large drops in March and April, but represents a slowdown from the increase of 6.4% in July. Despite the increases over the last 4 months, GDP remains 9.4% below the level in February, prior to the direct impacts of COVID-19. And Sam, if I can come to you here, as a small business owner who's been affected by some of these restrictions, what do you make of this announcement from the Scottish Government?
It's welcomed. Every penny is certainly welcomed by small businesses. However, it's not really a lot. It's not a lot to get people by. But then again, that all comes down to Westminster. So I understand that the Scottish Government's hands are tied on this and they are doing their best. What can I say? It's so difficult for everybody right now. It doesn't matter whether you're employed or what, or run a wee business. It is just so difficult right now. And yeah, every wee penny counts. And as I say, it's welcomed, but unfortunately, due to Westminster, our hands are tied in how much we can help small businesses.
Yeah, well, we move on now to something that I'm sure with that sweatshirt on, Chris will be happy to talk about. The SNP has urged the Tory government to grant the right to work to asylum seekers waiting for a decision on their asylum application. After 181,399 petition signatures were given to the Home Office, demanding they lift the ban on working for those in the asylum system. Currently, people seeking asylum in the UK are only able to apply for the right to work after they have been waiting for a decision on their asylum claim for over a year. And those then granted such permission are rarely able to work in practice because their employment is restricted to the UK government's shortage occupation list. Those seeking refugee status are living on just £5.39 per day, whilst they wait months or years for decisions on their asylum claim. The SNP's Shadow Immigration Minister has said the UK government is leaving people destitute, as well as wasting the talents of thousands of people who could be contributing to society and the wider UK economy through choice. In a Lift the Ban Coalition report released earlier this year, figures revealed that 71% of people in the UK agree that people seeking asylum should be allowed to work. The SNP has consistently called for the ban to be lifted, and SNP MP Carol Monaghan has brought forward a bill that, if passed, will do just that. The Asylum Seekers Permission to Work Bill is due to have its second reading in February of next year. So, Chris, I know you wore your refugee t-shirt, hoodie rather, especially for tonight's show. What do you make of this, and what are your thoughts on the ban on letting asylum seekers work?
Well, I mean, it's welcome, obviously, and I'd like to congratulate Carol Monaghan for bringing this bill forward. Again, Carol has been an studious champion of refugee rights and asylum seeker rights as well. It is a plainly obvious argument that people with skills who, and this is not endemic to Scotland. It happens in Manchester, it happens in Liverpool, it happens in Dover. No matter where asylum seekers land, they have skills and they want to contribute to society that they're in. They might be knocked back after the procedure has went through, but at least it would lift them out of the poverty that they are living in at this moment in time. And that would be that the fact that you could shut Nigel Farage and people like his ilk up by saying that they're only coming here just to live off benefits. Well, if £5.34 is a benefit per day, I would much rather stay in the Sudan or in the Gaza Strip, because that is a paltry amount of money for any human to try and survive on. When I was out in Calais and Dunkirk, I came across, honestly, I came across mechanics, I came across chefs, I came across writers, journalists even, and these people just want to work. All they want is a roof over their head and to contribute to society. So it's madness, the fact that the UK government are denying this basic human right, because that's what it is. It is a basic human right that all humans can basically go to work and provide for their families. And it's high time that someone at the UK government got a wee touch of humanity and allowed these people to contribute to the society that they're living in.
Mm. And Chris, as you say, a lot of the refugees and asylum seekers who do make it to the UK are very often very highly skilled. Often the people who are able to make that kind of journey are the people who have some resources, who have maybe saved a bit of money, or who just have the skills to be able to traverse a continent to get here. What do you think? What do you think a difference it would make to the asylum system if people were able to work as soon as they arrived? Do you think that would encourage more people to come, or do you think it would just change what happens when they're here?
It wouldn't encourage any more to come over, because asylum seekers that are fleeing war, don't just pin a pin into the map and and directly land at Britain and stuff like that. I would like to tell the viewers that asylum seekers in the likes of Germany and Austria, Holland even, Sweden, they get far better treatment than what the UK government ever could possibly dole out. We've got asylum seekers living in down in the southernmost point of Kent, and they're using old army barracks which have got old Anderson shelter type bunks, which have the bare minimum of electricity. They have they have not been modernised in any such way, shape, or form. There is no there is bare amount of heating, and these people are being denied access to mental health services. They're being denied to advocacy services. They're being denied to services from lawyers. So let's not kid ourselves. The UK government are great at deflecting away, and Sam touched on this earlier on, is the fact that the UK government are great from deflecting away from the problem in hand, and then they just shout out, "Oh look, migrants coming in a boat," and it's 20, 25 migrants at a time coming over in the boat, and they are not illegal at this moment in time. When those migrants are in the water, they are not illegal. They are lawful seeking asylum seekers who have flown or flown from war, from devastation, from bombing, from sometimes actually starvation, So, they have got every right to land at whatever country is going to offer them, a modicum of dignity, humanity, and hospitality. So make no assertions about those, bad people coming over in boats. They are not bad people. They are the majority of them, as you say, Kenny, quite rightly. They are highly intelligent. They are qualified people. Yes, okay, some of the doctors would need to get retrained in various aspects of the NHS and stuff like that. But, journalism is journalism. Some of them, can obviously translate from Arabic into English. So there's a vital commodity that we could use right there and then. As I say, some of them are mechanics. And a car in Britain that is broken down is exactly the same as a car in, Afghanistan that is broken down. It just needs the parts to be supplied and the person to fit the parts. It's, I'm not going to belittle it by saying it's not rocket science.
Well, Chris,
mechanics is rocket science, but
I'm going to just interrupt you here, Chris, because we are coming on to another story about Asylum, and I want to get Sam's comments and yours on it. So we are just going to go to that just now. The Court of Appeal has quashed a Home Office policy of removing migrants from the UK without access to justice. In a unanimous decision, 3 judges found the policy, which allowed the forcible removal of a migrant from the UK sometimes within hours and in many cases without access to lawyers, to be unlawful. More than 40,000 removals were affected by the policy, resulting in vulnerable people being put at risk. Some who were recognised as having been removed unlawfully were brought back to the UK and granted leave to remain. Today's ruling will be a blow for the Home Secretary Priti Patel, who has vowed to take a tough line on removing migrants from the UK. It also comes at a time when she has been reported to be considering making some definitions of human rights law for judges, rather than leaving judges to decide these legal points for themselves. So Sam, just quite quickly on this, we've heard the Home Office campaigning against, lefty lawyers and activist lawyers who are trying to make the government follow the rule of law. Now we're seeing judges doing the same, and the Home Office is not happy. What does that say about the kind of mentality at the Home Office now?
Basically, they are right-wing fascists that basically do not give a jot for the law. And the rest I'm going to leave to Chris, because I'm sure he's got lots to say on this. So I'm going to let him have the platform.
I know, and I thought I'd leave Chris to just simmer for another couple of minutes to see how bad the rant got. But Chris, what do you make of this decision?
Well, this might be my last appearance on Broadcasting Scotland, folks. But when it comes down to Priti Patel, and my religious beliefs have long since passed. But there's a woman, as they used to say in Glasgow, she's got a face that only a mother could love. But I mean, to go out and victimise human rights advocates and human rights lawyers as being vermin lefties, because they have a bit of solidarity in them, they have a bit of humanity in them for their fellow man. And what they're doing is, she cannot demonise the people themselves, as in the asylum seekers, the migrants, because they have no voice. So what she will do is that she will demonise those who do have a voice. And again, as Sam said earlier on in the show, it creates this us and them narrative. And when you have that us and them narrative, it is basically, it comes down to good champion, evil. And I'm no great lover of the courts and law lords and folk in red ermine and all the rest of it. But fair play to the 3 judges that actually overruled her pernicious attack on vulnerable people who have got no recourse whatsoever unless somebody takes up their case. Can you imagine being a poor migrant with no access to a human rights lawyer or even a cab office, to possibly ask them, how do I qualify for this £5.34? If they've not got that access, then Priti Patel can just stamp on them there and then. So these people that have actually stood up, for humanity, for their rights, fair play to them. And actually, I'll go a wee bit further than that. God bless them, because it does actually restore a wee bit of faith in human nature.
Well, thank you for that, Chris. And I think you will be back on Broadcast in Scotland after that one. We'll see, though. We move on, though. And sorry, I need to stop laughing for this story. Soldiers opened fire on Nigerians protesting against police brutality in the Lekki district of the capital, Lagos, today. And at least 2 people were shot, according to witnesses. Thousands of Nigerians have demonstrated here nationwide every day for nearly 2 weeks against a police unit, the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, which has been accused for years of extortion, harassment, torture and murder. The unit was disbanded on October the 11th, but the protests have persisted, with demonstrators calling for a raft of law enforcement reforms. So, Sam, I know you were reading a wee bit about what's going on in Nigeria. What do you make of this story?
This is just absolutely heartbreaking. I came across this story during the night last night because I kind of wasn't sleeping very well. So it was one of those ones that you start kind of looking into things, and it was absolutely heartbreaking. But what I found out was the special branch, the SARS unit, was started in 1992, and they were basically part of the Nigerian police force. And they were established to deal with robbery, firearms, and various other crimes. But what's actually ended up happening is they have been torturing people, they have been involved in various legal activities, and there's been extrajudicial killings as well. So they're being quite controversial. So the protests that have been happening in Nigeria have been about end SARS. It's to end this branch of the police, which is basically full of corruption. And from what I'd seen, what had happened was there was a peaceful demonstration, people were singing the Nigerian national anthem, and basically these, they're not even human, the monsters started firing into the crowds, resulting in 2 deaths, which was absolutely just, there was videos last night I ended up watching and I ended up having to turn off. It's just, what can I say? It's absolutely despicable. Absolutely despicable. Human nature at its worst, I'm afraid.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we move on now back to Scotland, and the Scottish Tories are under pressure to confirm their commitment to free school meals after the Scottish Government announced a funding package of over £10 million to make free school meals available over the Christmas, February and Easter holidays. Douglas Ross had previously promised to introduce free school meals at both breakfast and lunch for all primary pupils if his party gained power next year. A vote was due in the House of Commons today on plans to extend free school meals over the holidays in England. The SNP have urged all MPs to vote for the motion, particularly Douglas Ross and the Scottish Tories, saying this is a chance for them to follow through on their commitment and regain some credibility. Their colleagues at Westminster have repeatedly rebuffed calls to expand the scheme, with a Number 10 spokesperson saying it's not for schools to regularly provide food to pupils during the school holidays. Footballer Marcus Rashford has been campaigning for the UK government to extend the free school meal scheme in England through the half-term and Christmas holidays. A petition he launched has been signed by almost 300,000 people. So Chris, what do you make of this? I think I heard you laughing a wee bit in there at the idea of Douglas Ross's integrity.
No, I was actually laughing at the notion that the Tories could ever be in charge of Scotland.
Oh, I see.
Uh,
Okay.
let alone Douglas Ross being the first minister. That is about the funniest thing I've ever heard in my life. But yeah, I believe this vote is happening not as we speak. I think it's being discussed, and it'll be voted on later on tonight. I honestly, I had to pick myself off the floor there when you were introducing this item, because what we have is, and quite right, Marcus Rashford, fair play to the boy, stuff like that. He managed to get Boris to do a U-turn earlier on in the year. But Boris has come out today and said basically that they will not do it. And the Tories will be going through the voting lobbies to vote against this. So if there's anybody that's tuning in from England, that is happening to be watching the show, this is exactly what the Tories do. This is what they stand for. And they are basically at a time when, families, again, augmenting exactly what Sam said earlier on about the fact that people are relying on food banks and they can hardly feed themselves, let alone their children. But then when the children are on holiday, it makes it all the more tougher, because when they're at school, they're at least getting a meal. But this particular vote is to do with the provision of free school meals at holiday time.
Okay.
It has
Sorry, yeah, we're just getting a message in my ear there, just in the last few minutes. It has been voted down, so yes.
So what do I tell you then? What do I tell you? That tells you everything that you need to know. Now, the one thing that I do need to tell the viewers is the fact that in Scotland, we do not need, or there is no need for a footballer to turn round to our First Minister and petition her to give free school meals to children, because she does it out of sheer consciousness. And it's done out of empathy for the people, because she fully understands the fact that people are relying on food banks. We had a report out from the Trussell Trust saying that basically food bank usage is going to be ramping up to about 83% at the end of furlough and coming up to Christmas. And and Sam's quite right to point out the fact that if people don't actually make a claim for the universal credit this week, they will be without any money over the Christmas period, and that's when they will be heavily reliant on food banks. So when the children, at least are at school, they at least know that they're going to get one decent meal, which is pivotal to earlier on. Again, all the stories tonight are perfectly linked in, because earlier on tonight we were talking about Scotland producing geniuses, and study shows that performance levels are higher when children are more attentive at school, and they cannot be attentive when they've got empty bellies in them. So, people need to look at what the Scottish Government are doing for children and have a look at what the Tory Government are doing for children, and then you draw your comparisons on who's better off in what union.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of my heroes, a guy called Scott Santons, the UBI campaigner, always talks about the lost Einstein problem of how many geniuses are lost to us because they were too stupid to pick rich parents. So yes, that's something we should always think about. But still thinking about kids, a consultation is published today on revised national guidance for child protection in Scotland. Children's Minister Marie Todd said the National Guidance for Child Protection, published in 2014, is being updated so it is as relevant and effective as possible. The guidance describes the responsibilities of everyone who works with children, young people and their families, and sets out how agencies should collaborate to protect children from abuse, neglect and exploitation. Our commitment remains that getting it right for every child is the approach to ensure children get the right support at the right time. The revised guidance integrates the intentions of the promise, the implementation of the care review, and emphasises the importance of listening to children and building on the strength in each family to provide the necessary support in each situation. I would encourage anyone who works with children, young people and their families to have their say on the revised guidance by taking part in this consultation and the planned engagement events. So Sam, there has been a wee bit of controversy in the past over the SNP's policies on getting it right for every child. This new consultation is going to update the guidance. Are you confident that this is going to get it right for every child?
I don't know. There's always going to be kids, unfortunately, that fall through the cracks. This is a bit tough for me because my family, as you know, has been in this situation where different agencies weren't talking to each other and not sharing information. And it was only when I had to step in and literally fight the system that the agencies started talking, and information was shared. It's a difficult, and that shouldn't be happening because at the end of the day, child protection is utmost. But the problem is, one of the biggest problems I find we've been through a child protection situation is that so many the professionals have never actually experienced an actual child protection case. So what ends up happening is they go by the textbook. Sorry, my Christopher was asking to go to the ice cream van there. So anyway, so I was trying to watch what I was saying while he was in the room. So anyway, so it's quite difficult in the sense that, if they've got no experience in child protection, they go by what's on the notebook, which becomes a tick box exercise. There needs to be more training, definitely, with people on the ground who are in direct contact, and when they need to be very much a case of listening to children and listening to parents or family members who have concerns about the child. And I would go so far as to say that every person, every adult in the community has a responsibility for child protection. Everyone has that responsibility, and even if you get it wrong, it's always better to get it wrong and know a child is safe than to ignore it and a child to be in harm's way. So there's so much else I can say, but I can't.
We don't have all night, but no, thank you very much for that, Sam. And obviously, if you're getting Christopher an ice cream at this time of night, then you are getting it right for him at least. So there we go. We move on now to our last story, and children and young people with additional support needs will now be directly involved in the decisions that affect them following an independent review. The Scottish Government and COSLA have drawn up a joint action plan for additional support for learning, or ASL, after accepting the recommendations made in the independent review chaired by Angela Morgan. Measures include directly involving children, young people and their families in decisions around ASL, changing the way in which the achievements and successes of children and young people with additional support needs are recognised, and enhanced support for teachers and school staff. Progress against these measures will be reported on by October 2021. So, Chris, what do you make of this? Kind of ties in a wee bit to the previous comments from Sam there about listening to children, about letting children be involved in planning their own lives. What do you make of this?
Well, it has to be welcomed, and I know Sam has got a great authority on the previous subject matter. But with regards to children with additional needs, you made a call that my daughter heavily relies on the self-directed support system. I mean, when she was younger, she had various classroom assistants and various support staff in place in order to help her get through the day. And again, that's all fine, well and dandy. It's great. But I would like to see this additional support carry on through into younger adult life. I don't believe that there should be an age cut off in any such way, shape, or form. Not to get too personal, but my daughter is 20, but she has a learning age of about 12. So when you compare the fact that the support that she needs now at age 20 is exactly the same support that she was getting at the age of 12, but because there's a cut off at 18, that support is taken away, and obviously it's directed to other people, which is, in one way that's great that other people are benefiting from it. But at the end of the day, there are people in society who need constant support all their lives. Make no mistake, my ex-wife does fantastic with giving Caitlin all the support that she gets. But people are sometimes not as they're not blessed to be in that situation where they've got a really good support mechanism. And again, this goes back to what we've been discussing throughout the whole show tonight, which has been absolutely fantastic for content, because the running theme throughout the whole show for me has been empathy and humanity, and understanding other people's needs, and other people's desires and all the rest of it. And when young children have still got aspirational thoughts themselves, some children do actually need a wee bit of support in order to achieve those aspirational thoughts. So, anything that the Scottish Government can come out and do in order to help them, I'll only chip in. It's got to be 100% better than anything you could get from the UK government.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that, Chris, and thank you to both of you, especially for your personal kind of contributions tonight. It's been really excellent to hear from both of you, so thank you for that. And thank you to you at home for joining us as well. We do have to ask, if you're able to support Broadcasting Scotland, then please do go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register. Sign up there as a supporter, and your £5 a month helps us to keep making these programmes and keep building a better broadcaster for Scotland. If you're not able to support us financially, don't worry. The shows will always be free to view online. You will always be welcome here. But you can still make a big difference for us by following us on Twitter @BroadcastScot, by liking our Facebook page, by subscribing to our YouTube channel and clicking the bell icon there to make sure you're notified about new videos going up. And then share the shows around. Word of mouth is by far the best way to spread the word about what Broadcasting Scotland does. So do please let people know that you watch us and why they should give us a chance as well. And finally, we are always looking for new bodies to come and help out here. There's a lot of work to be done if we are going to build this better broadcaster for Scotland. So if you're interested at all in getting involved in broadcasting, whether behind the camera or in front of it, then do please get in touch with us. We would love to hear from you. That is just about all we have time for tonight, though. So once again, thank you very much to Sam Payne and to Chris McCusker for joining us. Thank you at home for joining us. We'll see you again tomorrow night. Have a great evening. Good night.